Imagine walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood on an ordinary afternoon. The streets are clean. The houses are comfortable but not extravagant. Cars are parked neatly in driveways. Nothing seems unusual. Now imagine that behind one of those front doors lives a millionaire. Not the kind of millionaire you see on social media. Not someone driving a Lamborghini. Not someone wearing a Rolex worth more than a new car. Not someone posting pictures from private jets or luxury resorts. In fact, if you pass this person on the street, you probably wouldn't even notice them. And that's exactly what surprised researchers Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko. For years, they studied wealthy Americans, expecting to discover glamorous lifestyles, extravagant spending habits, and obvious signs of success. Instead, they found something completely different. The people who had accumulated the most wealth often looked surprisingly ordinary. Many lived in modest homes. Many drove used cars. Many avoided luxury brands. And many spent far less than they earned. These findings became the foundation of one of the most influential personal finance books ever written, The Millionaire Next Door. But this book isn't really about millionaires. It's about a hidden truth that most people never learn, a truth that explains why some people become wealthy while others spend their entire lives chasing money without ever achieving financial freedom. And once you understand this truth, you may never look at wealth the same way again, because real wealth isn't what you see, it's what you don't see. Let's begin. Picture two neighbors living on the same street. The first neighbor drives a brand new luxury SUV. Every few years, they upgrade to the latest model. Their clothes are expensive. Their vacations look incredible on Instagram. Their home is filled with the newest gadgets and designer furniture. To everyone around them, they appear successful. Now look at the second neighbor. They drive a 10-year-old car. Their clothes are simple. Their house is comfortable but unremarkable. They rarely talk about money. They don't seem particularly wealthy. If you had to guess who was richer, most people would choose the first neighbor. And most people would be wrong. This was one of the biggest discoveries made by Stanley and Danko. Many people who appear rich are actually living paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, many genuine millionaires look surprisingly average. Why? Because appearance and wealth are not the same thing. In fact, they often move in opposite directions. The more money someone spends trying to look wealthy, the less money they have available to actually become wealthy. Think about it. Every dollar spent on status symbols is a dollar that can no longer be invested. Every expensive purchase reduces future opportunities. Every attempt to impress others comes with a hidden cost. The problem is that society constantly confuses income with wealth. A doctor earning $400,000 a year may appear rich. A lawyer earning $500,000 a year may appear rich. A celebrity earning millions may appear rich. But income and wealth are different things. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you keep. And keeping money is far more difficult than earning it. Imagine two people. Person A earns $300,000 per year and spends $295,000. Person B earns $80,000 per year and spends $50,000. Who becomes wealthier over time? The answer is obvious. Yet millions of people spend their entire lives focusing on income while ignoring wealth. The Millionaire Next Door understands something different. They understand that financial freedom isn't created by what enters your bank account. It's created by what stays there. One of the most fascinating stories in the book involves people living in wealthy neighborhoods. Researchers noticed something strange. Many people living in expensive areas had surprisingly low levels of actual wealth. Their incomes were high, their lifestyles were impressive, but their net worth was often disappointing. Why? Because they felt constant pressure to spend. When everyone around you drives luxury vehicles, you feel pressure to upgrade. When everyone around you lives in a massive house, your own home suddenly feels inadequate. When everyone around you wears expensive watches, yours starts to seem outdated. This creates a dangerous cycle. You spend more to fit in. Then you need a higher income to support that spending. Then your lifestyle expands even further. Eventually, you're trapped. You look wealthy, but you're not. The authors called this phenomenon living a high-consumption lifestyle, and it's one of the biggest obstacles to building real wealth. The Millionaire Next Door avoids this trap. Instead of competing with neighbors, they focus on something else entirely: freedom. Because freedom doesn't come from looking rich. Freedom comes from owning assets. Freedom comes from investments. Freedom comes from financial independence. And those things are often invisible. Think about Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world. For decades, he lived in the same relatively modest home he purchased in 1958. He could buy almost anything he wants, yet he doesn't feel the need to constantly display his wealth. Why? Because people who are truly secure rarely need validation from others. This leads to one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. Wealthy people think differently about money. Most people see money as something to spend. Millionaires often see money as something to grow. Imagine receiving an extra $10,000. Many people immediately think about what they can buy: a vacation, a new phone, a luxury item, a better car. But the millionaire next door asks a different question. How can this money generate more money? That single shift in thinking changes everything. Because wealth is not built through isolated decisions. It's built through repeated habits, small choices, day after day, month after month, year after year. Most people underestimate the power of consistency. They believe wealth requires a lucky break, a massive salary, a winning lottery ticket, a perfect investment. But the research suggests otherwise. Many millionaires became wealthy through ordinary actions repeated over long periods of time. They saved consistently. They invested regularly. They avoided unnecessary debt. They lived below their means. And they continued doing these things year after year. At first, the results were almost invisible. Then something remarkable happened. Compound growth began to work its magic. Imagine planting a tree. For years, growth seems slow. You water it. You care for it. You wait. Nothing dramatic happens. Then one day you realize it's become enormous. Wealth works the same way. The early years feel frustrating. Progress appears minimal. Sacrifices seem pointless. But eventually, the accumulated effects become impossible to ignore. The millionaire next door understands this process. That's why they don't obsess over quick riches. They're focused on long-term results. Another surprising lesson from the book involves education. Many people assume that wealth automatically follows intelligence. But the researchers discovered something unexpected. Some of the wealthiest individuals weren't academic superstars. What separated them wasn't genius, it was discipline. They budgeted carefully, they controlled spending, they planned ahead, they made rational decisions instead of emotional ones. In other words, financial success often depends more on behavior than intelligence. This is encouraging news, because behavior can be changed. You don't need to be a genius investor. You don't need to predict the stock market. You don't need to invent the next billion-dollar company. You simply need habits that support wealth creation. And habits can be learned. Perhaps the most important lesson in The Millionaire Next Door is that wealth is often boring. That may sound disappointing. People love dramatic success stories. They love hearing about overnight millionaires. They love stories of sudden breakthroughs. But real wealth is usually built quietly, slowly, patiently, without headlines, without attention, without applause. And that's exactly why most people overlook it. The millionaire next door doesn't need everyone to know they're successful. Their goal isn't admiration. Their goal is independence. They don't want to impress strangers. They want control over their time, control over their choices, control over their future. And that's what makes this book so powerful. It's not teaching you how to look rich. It's teaching you how to become rich. There's a massive difference between those two goals. One creates temporary appearances. The other creates lasting freedom. As we continue exploring the lessons from this groundbreaking book, you'll discover why budgeting is actually a superpower, why many high-income earners never become wealthy, and the specific habits that separate financial winners from financial strugglers. Because the biggest secret of all is this: the millionaire next door isn't a rare exception. They might be living on your street, they might work in your city, and if you're willing to adopt the same principles, one day that millionaire next door might be you. Now let's go deeper into one of the most misunderstood ideas about wealth. Most people believe that becoming rich starts with earning more money. And while increasing your income certainly helps, the authors discovered something surprising. Many people with enormous incomes never become wealthy. At first, that sounds impossible. How can someone earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year struggle to build wealth? The answer lies in a simple concept: lifestyle inflation. Imagine receiving a significant raise. You tell yourself you'll save more, invest more, build your future. But then something happens. Your apartment suddenly feels too small. Your car feels outdated. Your wardrobe needs an upgrade. Your vacations become more expensive. Your spending quietly expands to match your income. And before long, you're earning more than ever while feeling just as financially stressed as before. This is one of the greatest traps in modern life. As income rises, expectations rise with it. The finish line keeps moving. The lifestyle keeps expanding, and wealth never gets a chance to grow. The Millionaire Next Door understands a principle that most people ignore. Just because you can afford something doesn't mean you should buy it. Think about that for a moment. Modern society encourages the opposite mindset. Advertisements constantly whisper the same message: you deserve this. Upgrade your life. Treat yourself. Success should be visible. But every purchase has a hidden consequence. Money spent today loses the opportunity to grow tomorrow. $1,000 invested can become several thousand over time. $1,000 spent is gone forever. The difference may seem small in the moment, but over decades it becomes enormous. This is why the book repeatedly emphasizes living below your means. Not because deprivation is enjoyable, not because money should never be spent, but because the gap between what you earn and what you spend is where wealth is created. Imagine a bucket. Your income pours water into the bucket. Your spending creates holes in the bottom. The larger the holes, the harder it becomes to accumulate anything. Most people focus entirely on increasing the flow of water. Millionaires focus on protecting the bucket, and that's a completely different way of thinking. The researchers found that many wealthy people maintain spending habits that look surprisingly modest compared to their incomes. Even after becoming successful, they resisted the urge to dramatically upgrade their lifestyles. This wasn't because they lacked money. It was because they understood the long-term consequences of every financial decision. They viewed money as a tool, not a trophy, and that distinction changes everything. Consider the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out. Simple. Yet many people spend years collecting liabilities while believing they're building wealth. Luxury cars, expensive gadgets, designer goods, oversized homes. These items may create the appearance of success, but appearances don't pay bills. Appearances don't generate income. Appearances don't create financial freedom. The Millionaire Next Door focuses on assets, businesses, investments, stocks, real estate, savings, anything capable of growing in value or producing income. While others buy symbols of wealth, they buy the foundations of wealth, and over time, those foundations become incredibly powerful. Another fascinating discovery from the book involved time management. At first, this may seem unrelated to money, but the connection is profound. Many millionaires spent significantly more time planning their finances than average people. They tracked expenses, reviewed investments, created goals, analyzed opportunities. In other words, they treated wealth building as a priority. This may sound obvious, yet most people spend more time planning a vacation than planning their financial future. Think about that. People carefully compare hotels, research destinations, read reviews, create itineraries. But when it comes to money, many simply hope things will work out. Hope is not a financial strategy. The Millionaire Next Door understands this. They know that successful outcomes rarely happen by accident. They happen through deliberate action, through planning, through discipline, through consistency. One of the most valuable concepts in the book is delayed gratification. This idea sounds simple, but it may be one of the most important skills in life. Delayed gratification means sacrificing a smaller reward today for a larger reward tomorrow. Children struggle with it. Many adults struggle with it too, because humans naturally crave immediate rewards. We want results now, pleasure now, success now. But wealth doesn't operate on that timeline. Wealth rewards patience. Imagine two people starting their careers. The first person spends every paycheck as soon as it arrives. The second person consistently saves and invests a portion of every paycheck. At first, their lives appear similar. The difference is barely noticeable. 5 years pass. Still, the gap seems small. 10 years pass. Now the difference becomes visible. 20 years pass. The gap becomes massive. 30 years pass. They are living completely different realities. Not because of luck, not because of intelligence, but because one person mastered delayed gratification and the other didn't. This is the hidden power of compound growth. Most people underestimate it because the early results seem insignificant. Imagine folding a piece of paper in half, then folding it again and again. Each fold doubles its thickness. Initially, the growth seems tiny, but after enough repetitions, the numbers become astonishing. Investments work in a similar way. The early years feel slow. The later years become transformative. The millionaire next door understands this mathematical reality. That's why they focus on long-term accumulation instead of short-term consumption. Another lesson from the research challenges a common assumption. Many people believe that wealthy individuals inherit most of their money. Certainly some do. But the authors found that many millionaires were self-made. They weren't born into extraordinary privilege. They didn't win lotteries. They didn't receive massive inheritances. Instead, they built wealth gradually, one decision at a time, one investment at a time, 1 year at a time. This is important because it shifts responsibility. If wealth depended entirely on inheritance, there would be little we could do. But if wealth largely depends on behavior, habits, and decisions, then the future becomes far more flexible. The book repeatedly demonstrates that financial success is often accessible to ordinary people willing to follow extraordinary discipline. This brings us to one of the most surprising characteristics of millionaires. Many of them are business owners, not necessarily owners of giant corporations, not celebrity entrepreneurs, not founders of billion-dollar startups, just ordinary business owners, people who provide valuable products or services, people who solve problems, people who create value for others. Why does business ownership matter? Because ownership creates leverage. When you're an employee, your income is often tied to your time. When you own a business, your efforts can create systems that continue generating value even when you're not personally involved every minute. This doesn't mean everyone should start a business tomorrow, but it highlights an important principle. Wealth often flows toward ownership. Ownership of businesses, ownership of investments, ownership of assets. The millionaire next door consistently seeks ways to become an owner rather than merely a consumer. Now let's discuss something many people avoid: debt. Modern culture often treats debt as normal. Credit cards, car loans, personal loans, financing plans. Buy now, pay later. Debt has become so common that many people stop questioning it. But the authors found that wealthy individuals generally approach debt very differently. They were cautious, selective, strategic. They understood that debt can quietly consume future income. Every payment reduces flexibility. Every interest charge transfers wealth to someone else. This doesn't mean all debt is bad. Certain types of debt can be useful, but the millionaire next door avoids unnecessary debt whenever possible. Because financial freedom and financial obligations often move in opposite directions. The fewer obligations you carry, the more freedom you possess. Freedom to invest, freedom to take opportunities, freedom to withstand setbacks, freedom to make choices based on values rather than financial pressure. And ultimately, isn't that what wealth is really about? Not luxury, not status, not applause, freedom. The freedom to spend your time as you choose, the freedom to support your family, the freedom to pursue meaningful work, the freedom to sleep peacefully at night. This perspective completely transforms the purpose of money. Money stops being a scorecard. It becomes a tool for building a better life. And that's why the lessons of the millionaire next door remain relevant decades after its publication. Because human nature hasn't changed. People still chase appearances. People still compare themselves to others. People still overspend in pursuit of status. And people still underestimate the power of patience. But those who understand the principles hidden inside this book gain a tremendous advantage. They stop playing the game of looking rich and start playing the game of becoming wealthy. Imagine two families living in the same city. Both families earn respectable incomes. Both parents work hard. Both want the best possible future for their children. Yet 30 years later, their financial situations look completely different. One family has accumulated substantial wealth. The other continues struggling despite decades of effort. What caused the difference? According to the Millionaire Next Door, the answer often has less to do with income and more to do with values. Because wealth is not only built through financial decisions, it's also shaped by the beliefs we pass from one generation to the next. One of the most surprising discoveries in the book involved the children of wealthy parents. Most people assume that giving children more money automatically helps them succeed. After all, isn't that what every parent wants? To make life easier for their children? But the research revealed something unexpected. In many cases, excessive financial support actually reduced the likelihood of long-term financial success. Think about it. When someone constantly receives financial assistance, they may never develop the habits required to create wealth on their own. The ability to budget, the ability to save, the ability to delay gratification, the ability to solve problems independently. These skills are often forged through responsibility, not comfort. The self-made millionaires studied by Stanley and Danko frequently taught their children an important lesson. Financial independence matters. They provided guidance. They provided education. They provided opportunities. But they avoided creating dependence. Because dependence weakens initiative. And initiative is one of the most valuable assets a person can possess. Imagine a young adult receiving everything they've ever wanted. Every mistake is covered. Every problem is solved. Every challenge is removed. At first, this appears generous. But over time, something dangerous can happen. The person may become dependent on external support. Meanwhile, another young adult learns to manage money, learns to work, learns to fail, learns to recover, learns to make decisions. Years later, that second person often possesses something far more valuable than financial assistance. They possess capability, and capability creates opportunity. This principle extends far beyond parenting. It applies to everyone. Because ultimately, wealth is not simply about possessing resources. It's about developing the ability to create resources. The Millionaire Next Door understands this distinction. That's why many of them prioritize competence over appearances, skills over status, productivity over prestige. One of the strongest patterns observed throughout the research was self-reliance. Many millionaires took responsibility for their outcomes. They didn't spend their lives blaming circumstances. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't assume someone else would rescue them. Instead, they focused on what they could control: their spending, their saving, their investments, their work ethic, their decisions. This mindset may sound simple, but it creates a dramatic difference over time. Because people who focus on what they can control are more likely to take action, and action changes outcomes. Meanwhile, people who focus exclusively on external factors often become trapped in frustration. The Millionaire Next Door isn't immune to problems. They face setbacks like everyone else: economic downturns, business failures, unexpected expenses, personal challenges. The difference is how they respond. Instead of seeing obstacles as permanent barriers, they see them as temporary challenges. This resilience becomes a major advantage. Another fascinating lesson from the book concerns social pressure. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. It's part of our psychology. We compare houses, cars, careers, vacations, clothing, achievements. And today, social media has amplified this tendency to unprecedented levels. Every day, millions of people are exposed to carefully curated highlights of other people's lives: luxury vacations, designer products, expensive restaurants, dream homes, exotic cars. The result? Many people feel pressured to keep up, even when doing so damages their financial future. The Millionaire Next Door often rejects this game entirely. They understand something powerful. Comparison is expensive. The moment you start measuring success through other people's lifestyles, your financial decisions become distorted. You stop asking what you truly want and start asking what will impress others. But impressing others is a moving target. No matter how much you spend, there will always be someone with more: a bigger house, a newer car, a more luxurious lifestyle. The race never ends. which is why the smartest participants choose not to enter the race at all. Instead, they define success differently. For some, success means financial security. For others, it means time freedom. For others, it means supporting family members, or pursuing meaningful work, or retiring early. The specific goal may vary, but the principle remains the same. True wealth serves your values, not other people's expectations. This perspective dramatically changes how money is used. Money becomes a tool, a resource, a means to an end, rather than a way to seek validation. The book also highlights the importance of planning, not just financial planning, life planning. Many millionaires lived intentionally. They knew what they wanted. They established goals. They created systems. They tracked progress. Imagine setting off on a cross-country road trip without a destination, without a map, without directions, without a plan. You might eventually arrive somewhere, but it probably won't be where you hoped. Financial life works the same way. Without goals, decisions become reactive. Without direction, opportunities are easily missed. The millionaire next door rarely leaves important outcomes to chance. They understand that clarity creates focus, and focus produces results. One of the most inspiring aspects of the book is that its lessons are accessible. You don't need extraordinary talent. You don't need a perfect background. You don't need celebrity status. You don't need to be born rich. The principles remain remarkably practical. Spend less than you earn. Invest consistently. Avoid unnecessary debt. Focus on ownership. Ignore status competition. Practice patience. Develop self-discipline. Take responsibility. These ideas may not sound exciting. In fact, that's part of their power. They're simple, timeless, and proven. The challenge isn't understanding them. The challenge is applying them consistently, because consistency is where transformation occurs. Anyone can make a good decision once. Anyone can save money for a week. Anyone can resist an impulse purchase occasionally. But building wealth requires repetition, again and again, month after month, year after year. And that's where most people struggle. They seek shortcuts, quick wins, instant results. But the millionaire next door teaches a very different philosophy, a philosophy built on steady progress, small advantages compounded over long periods, quiet discipline, invisible growth. And while this approach may not generate headlines, it often generates something far more valuable: results. Yet perhaps the most important lesson of all is still ahead. Because after studying thousands of wealthy individuals, the authors uncovered a deeper truth, a truth that explains why some people maintain wealth across decades while others lose it almost as quickly as they acquire it. It has nothing to do with luck, very little to do with intelligence, and surprisingly little to do with income. Instead, it revolves around a single factor that influences every financial decision a person makes, a factor so powerful that it quietly determines whether money becomes a lifelong servant or a lifelong master. And understanding that principle may completely change the way you think about wealth forever. That's exactly where our story continues in the final chapter. And now we arrive at the final lesson. The lesson that quietly sits beneath every principle discussed in this book. The lesson that separates people who merely earn money from people who build lasting wealth. It's a lesson about character. Because after years of research, interviews, surveys, and analysis, Stanley and Danko discovered something remarkable. The most successful wealth builders weren't necessarily the smartest. They weren't always the highest earners. They weren't always the most educated. What they consistently possessed was discipline. And discipline, unlike talent, can be developed. Think about that. Many people spend years searching for a secret formula, a perfect investment, a hidden opportunity, a shortcut to financial freedom. But the people who actually achieve financial independence often follow principles that are surprisingly ordinary. The difference is that they follow them consistently. When others spend, they save. When others consume, they invest. When others seek approval, they seek freedom. When others focus on appearances, they focus on substance. And over time, these small differences create dramatically different outcomes. Imagine two airplanes leaving the same airport. At first, they travel in nearly identical directions. But one plane changes its course by only a few degrees. Nothing noticeable happens immediately. Passengers don't feel it. Observers can't see it. The difference seems insignificant. Yet thousands of miles later, the planes arrive in completely different destinations. Life works much the same way. Tiny decisions repeated daily create extraordinary consequences. One unnecessary purchase may seem harmless. One missed investment may seem unimportant. One financial shortcut may seem insignificant. But over decades, these decisions accumulate. They shape futures. They determine possibilities. They influence lifestyles. And ultimately, they affect freedom. This is why the Millionaire Next Door pays attention to habits. Because habits eventually become outcomes. One of the most powerful ideas in the book is that wealth often grows in silence. Modern culture celebrates visible success. The luxury car, the designer watch, the expensive vacation, the social media highlight reel. But real wealth frequently grows where nobody can see it. Inside investment accounts, inside businesses, inside retirement funds, inside appreciating assets. Invisible, quiet, patient, compounding year after year. The irony is fascinating. The people who look rich are not always wealthy, and the people who are wealthy do not always look rich. This misunderstanding causes countless individuals to pursue the wrong target. They chase symbols instead of substance. They chase image instead of independence. They chase admiration instead of security. The Millionaire Next Door chooses a different path, a path that often appears boring from the outside, but looks extraordinary from the inside. Because while others are purchasing status, they are purchasing options, and options are powerful. The option to retire early, the option to change careers, the option to start a business, the option to help family members, the option to weather financial storms, the option to say no when others are forced to say yes. In many ways, wealth is simply the accumulation of choices. The more resources you control, the more choices you possess. And the more choices you possess, the more freedom you enjoy. That's why true wealth is not measured by what you own. It's measured by what you can do. Consider a simple question. If you stop working tomorrow, how long could you maintain your current lifestyle? A week? A month? A year? 10 years? Forever? The answer reveals something important. Because financial freedom is not determined by income alone. It's determined by resilience, by preparation, by accumulated assets, by disciplined decisions made long before they were needed. The millionaires in this book understood this. They built margins into their lives, margins of money, margins of time, margins of opportunity. They prepared for uncertainty, because uncertainty is inevitable. Economic downturns arrive, markets fluctuate, industries change, unexpected expenses appear. Life rarely follows a perfect script, but people with strong financial foundations are better positioned to adapt, and adaptability is one of the greatest advantages wealth can provide. Another lesson worth remembering is that success leaves clues. The authors didn't study millionaires because they admired wealth. They studied millionaires because they wanted to understand behavior. What habits produced success? What patterns appeared repeatedly? What decisions led to long-term prosperity? And the answers challenge many popular assumptions. Wealth wasn't primarily built through luck, or inheritance, or flashy investments. It was built through planning, patience, discipline, consistency, responsibility, and perhaps most importantly, intentional living. Intentional living means deciding what matters before the world decides for you. Because if you don't define success yourself, someone else will define it on your behalf. Advertisers will define it. Social media will define it. Society will define it. And their definition usually involves spending more money. The Millionaire Next Door rejects that approach. Instead, they ask a different question. What kind of life do I actually want? The answer to that question shapes everything. If freedom matters, spending changes. If security matters, saving changes. If family matters, priorities change. If independence matters, decisions change. And slowly those changes begin transforming the future. One of the greatest myths about wealth is that it happens suddenly. But in reality, most fortunes are built gradually. One paycheck saved, one investment made, one smart decision repeated, again and again. The process isn't glamorous. It doesn't create viral headlines. It doesn't attract constant attention, but it works. And that's why the lessons from the Millionaire Next Door continue to resonate decades after publication. Because human behavior hasn't changed. People still overspend. People still compare themselves to others. People still underestimate the power of compounding. People still confuse income with wealth. And people still believe financial success requires extraordinary circumstances. Yet the evidence points elsewhere. It points toward ordinary individuals making extraordinary decisions consistently. Perhaps that's the most hopeful message in the entire book. The path to wealth isn't reserved for a select few. It's available to anyone willing to adopt the right habits, anyone willing to live below their means, anyone willing to prioritize long-term freedom over short-term appearances, anyone willing to invest in their future instead of constantly consuming the present. And maybe that's why the title is so brilliant, The Millionaire Next Door. Not the millionaire on television, not the millionaire on a private jet, not the millionaire in a movie, the millionaire next door, the person you might overlook, the person driving an older car, the person living in a modest house, the person quietly building wealth while the world focuses on appearances. Because true wealth rarely announces itself. It doesn't need to. Its rewards are already enough. As we close this journey, imagine yourself 20 years from now. The choices you make today have already compounded. The habits you practice today have already produced results. The financial decisions you make this week or this month and this year have shaped your future reality. What does that future look like? Does it reflect discipline or impulse, freedom or obligation, intentionality or reaction? Because the future is not built in a single dramatic moment. It's built in thousands of ordinary moments. The purchase you don't make, the investment you do make, the budget you follow, the debt you avoid, the plan you commit to, the patience you maintain. And while these actions may seem small individually, together they create something extraordinary. A life with options, a life with security, a life with freedom. That is the real message of the Millionaire Next Door. Wealth is not about looking successful. It is about becoming independent. It is not about impressing strangers. It is about creating choices. It is not about living for appearances. It is about living for purpose. And in a world obsessed with showing success, perhaps the greatest financial lesson of all is this. The people who truly win the game are often the ones who stop playing it for an audience. They quietly build, they patiently invest, they consistently improve. And one day, after years of invisible effort, they discover something remarkable. They no longer need money to prove they are successful because their freedom already has.